Yeah? Tonight we're in Boston in Lincolnshire. Welcome to Question Time. And as ever, a big welcome to our audience at home, to all of you who've come here to put the questions, and to our panel, of course, who don't know what those questions are. Conservative Defence Minister Anna Soubry, Labour's Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry, the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, the poet Benjamin Zephaniah, and the economist Vicky Pryce, briefly detained at Her Majesty's pleasure earlier this year for taking her husband's speeding points, which she's written a book about. Your panel. Kay Brown has our first question. Let's have it, Kay.
Have 1,000 shipbuilding jobs in Portsmouth been sacrificed to save the United Kingdom?
They're closing down. No more Royal Naval ships to be built in Portsmouth. 1,000 jobs lost there. Over 800 jobs actually lost in Scotland. Was it done to save the United Kingdom by keeping Scotland on side? Nigel Farage.
To a certain extent, yes. But if so, it's rather silly. Because if the Scots were to vote stupidly to divorce themselves from Westminster next year, and our shipbuilding capacity found itself on the Clyde and not in England, actually, through EU procurement rules, we wouldn't even be allowed to directly source ships from Scotland. So I think even if it has been done for that reason, it's a mistake. I have to say that I find what has been done to the Royal Navy by the last Labour government, but particularly by this coalition, even before the 1,000 jobs in Portsmouth were announced to be lost yesterday, Portsmouth had already turned into a museum city, and pray God that the Argentinians don't reinvade the Falklands, because if they did, we wouldn't even be able to do a single thing about it, and the whole thing, in my view, is a crying shame.
I don't want you to go on much longer, but you didn't address the key issue, which was the motive. Do you believe the motive was commercial, or was the motive you can have these ships, but if you vote for independence, you'll lose the contract?
I think that was part of it, but whether that is really going to have a massive effect in the Scottish elections, I don't know. But whether that's the motive or not, it is a massive strategic mistake to take away from this country's premier naval city that has been building ships for nearly 6 centuries, the ability to go on doing it. We're now building ships in Korea for the Royal Navy.
No,
what on earth are we thinking of?
That's
All
not
right.
true.
Anna Soubry.
That is simply... That is absolutely simply not true.
So you're not closing down?
No, forgive me, you said we were building ships for our Royal Navy in Korea.
Supply ships.
The replenishment ships.
Supply ships, yes.
The majority, the big ships, the ones that are costing billions of pounds, we are building in this country.
Are we building supply ships in Korea or not?
I didn't interrupt you when you were misleading.
Are we building supply ships in Korea or not?
Excuse me, I did not interrupt you when you...
I'm
going to answer the question from the woman who asked it in the audience,
Anna Soubry, Anna Soubry, just let's clear this up. Are we having supply ships built in South Korea for the Royal Navy?
I don't know if we are having supply ships. What I do know is please let me explain. The two huge aircraft carriers that are between them well over £7 billion, which will be the two largest aircraft carriers that our Royal Navy has ever had, are being built in this country.
No planes on them.
And they will have planes on them, and yet again you are misleading.
Nigel, you've been on this programme often enough to know the rules are you don't interrupt all the time, just occasionally. Anna.
And I think these are important issues, and I think we need to know the facts. Those planes will be built by 2017. That's when the aircraft carriers will be doing their sea trials. One at least will actually go into full operation.
But Portsmouth is the question, not the future of Portsmouth. Why are you
the question was about Portsmouth, and this day, unfortunately, was always going to come. Because we knew that the two big orders had been placed. We knew that as a result of those orders being fulfilled, there would then be a shortfall in the amount of work until we get the Type 26s up and running. And even if we go ahead and commission these new Type 26s, there will still be a shortfall in work. That was always known, unfortunately, when we entered into this agreement. In fact, it was the last government that entered into a contract which everybody agrees was absolutely dreadful. We have sorted that out fully to our credit, and we have filled a £38 billion black hole that we inherited from the last government. And far from people, if I may say, running down and criticising our Royal Navy, we should be praising it for the outstanding work it does.
Nobody's been questioning that. And I want to...
I think they were.
Anna,
and can I just go back to Portsmouth, which was the question?
What happens...
There will be 11,000 jobs still in Portsmouth supporting our Royal Navy.
What happens if Scotland votes for independence to those contracts? That's the question.
We don't know. In this sense.
You don't know?
Because
haven't you
this
thought about
government...
it?
Well, of course we have.
Well,
and
so
this government...
Why don't you know...
Well, am I going to be allowed to finish my sentence?
You always seem to get away with it.
OK. Because this is important stuff. It is as follows. We take the view that the Scottish people will do the right thing, that they will not vote to leave the United Kingdom. They will remain in the United Kingdom. And if that happens, then a decision will be made sometime after the referendum, a decision which was always planned to take place after the referendum. There is no connection between the two. Be absolutely clear about that, about the build of the Type 26s.
But if Scotland were to vote for independence, you would inevitably reconsider whether to build warships in Scotland?
We will take a decision on the Type 26s as we have always planned to do after the referendum. The referendum is completely separate to all of this, and it is also separate to yesterday's announcement. Yesterday's announcement was made by BAE Systems on commercial grounds.
Can I then ask you why your boss, Philip Hammond, the Defence Secretary, said that the UK hasn't, except during 2 world wars, ever placed orders for complex warships outside the UK. I don't anticipate the UK would wish to do that in the future, and I think there's something there the people in Scotland need to think about very carefully.
Yes, and the question is?
The question is, why did he say that?
Well, you'd have to ask him, but it sounds to make a lot of sense to me.
Well, you're part of his department. What he's saying here in effect, is if Scotland votes for independence, they won't get those contracts.
I don't think the decision about the Type 26
it'd be outside the UK, wouldn't it?
It would be if that's what the Scottish people do.
Precisely.
But my view is that the people of Scotland will make the right decision, which is to stay within the United Kingdom.
Vicky Pryce.
Well, I mean, it sounds on the face of it as if there was a political decision that's been made, whether we like it or not. However, underneath all that, there is a commercial reason why this has happened. And unfortunately, Portsmouth has suffered from this. And that is that, indeed, orders are not forthcoming for whatever Portsmouth thought might be happening there in the future. So there has to be some reorganisation. But the greatest issue for me is what happens to defence policy in this country. Is it an indication that we're going downhill? Or is there still a future? Of course, we have all these big orders coming up. We have the aircraft carriers being built. There will be some planes also that will fit on them. And there's going to be more stuff being done. But our percentage of, in terms of GDP that goes on defence, which is very high at present, it's one of the highest in the world. We're fourth in the world after the US, China and Russia, is going to be going down without any doubt. Because we're not, in fact, going to be ordering sort of a huge amount of stuff that we had been ordered before. We had an upswing during Labour. Huge amounts of money was spent on defence.
You think it should go down further?
I think it should go down further, but it should go down in line with what our obligations might be in Europe. I think what we really need is a proper defence capability in Europe. We can't
go down regardless of jobs on the Clyde or jobs in...
Well, what you can do... Well, yeah, what you can do, you can still do an awful lot of supply. What we were hoping for Portsmouth was that we'd be doing a lot of work for other countries that are, in fact, spending quite a lot now in refurbishing their own sort of capability, such as, for example, Japan, which is now spending quite a lot, surprisingly, on this. But those are not forthcoming. So it wasn't that we were going to be doing an awful lot of the things for us. We were going to be doing a lot of things for others. And the best thing to do is to do a European
Yes, but the UK politics of it, the UK politics of it, do you think these orders were placed on the Clyde in order to keep Scotland on side?
Well, the way it's been expressed, you can't really draw any other conclusion, which is unfortunate. I don't know whether they meant it, but that's certainly what it sounds like to me.
All right, fine. Yes, you sir. Oh, in the blue shirt.
Seems to me as if it's political blackmail. That's what it strikes me at.
Political blackmail in what sense? Just...
Well, there's one saying, right, we'll go into the Scottish if they elect to stay in UK. And that's about it.
And you don't think there's a commercial reason for it at all?
Sorry?
You don't think there's a commercial reason for the decision?
No.
No. And you, sir, behind her?
I understand that David Cameron has pledged to make apprenticeships the norm for all school leavers that choose not to go to university. How will closing the shipyards in Portsmouth improve the employment prospects for young people?
And you, sir,
I served in the Navy in the 1970s and 80s, and we had 10 times the amount of warships we had then. The Conservative government of the day caused the Falklands War. They have done nothing since then but cut our services, not only the Navy but all the services. They've treated us very badly.
OK. And you, sir, in the second row here.
I'm surprised with the reduced size of our armed forces that we have even one shipyard required these days. And given, having done 26 years in the Royal Air Force, I think the MOD has clearly indicated an ability to spend, but not to spend wisely.
OK. Emily, can I bring you back to the point made by the gentleman there, that this was blackmail of Scotland, this decision?
I take what people say, that mixed messages have come out of the government in terms of what it was, what the reasoning is behind this. But I think on the face of it, it looks like it was a commercial decision that they had to make. And they had to decide which yards to go for. And I think that it's tragic that Portsmouth has lost its place as building ships for the Navy. And as has been said, they've been doing this since the time of Henry VIII. So I think that it is tragic, but, you know, shipyard needed to close and the decision was made. I think in the future, though, I think that with the referendum coming up, it may well be that there will need to be a political decision to be made. And I think that we should be clear-eyed about that. I think that the UK must not lose its ability to build ships for the Navy. And if Scotland becomes independent, I think that it is quite likely that there will be a political decision made as to whether to go ahead with building those ships in Glasgow.
OK.
Oh, and sorry, may I also say, because I thought this was going to come up, I've got it written down on my pad, £38 billion black hole. Can I just say, right, we're getting this from the Tories all the time. They have been asked to work out, to tell us exactly how that adds up. Where do they get their numbers from? How does it figure? There isn't a reputable economic organisation that can back up what they say, including the National Audit Office. And we asked them to work out what this £38 billion is, and we've yet to have an answer. I don't know if we're going to get it tonight, but their sums do not add up. So they bandy these figures around. Right. It's obviously come out of Linton Crosby's back pocket, but it does not make any sense.
OK. So, Benjamin Zephaniah.
It's not simply that Portsmouth have lost. People in Scotland, I don't think they are celebrating, because people in Scotland have also lost jobs. Yes, they have. I think about the workers and their jobs. I don't think about the war machine. Nigel says what would happen if Argentina, if Nigel invaded us, if Argentina invaded us. I look at it like this: what would happen if absolute peace broke out? You know, what would happen then? We're so kind of fixated on this thing about war. There's loads of men and women who have skills to build ships and do other things. That I think we should start thinking about a civilian ship-making industry here, making ships for people like me when I retire to go on a cruise.
Right. Thank you. No, later on you can do it. I'm going to move on because we've spent a quarter of an hour on that. And just to say there that we're moving question time next week for reasons that will be apparent to you, from Brighton, just a few miles, to Portsmouth. The details of how to come to the Portsmouth programme are there on the bottom of the screen. As always, of course, you can comment on what's being said tonight by text or Twitter. Our hashtag BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text comments 83981. The red button will tell you what other people are saying, as you know all too well. Richard Light, please.
My family have lived in Boston for nearly 200 years now, and we have to fight for services that seem to get handed to newcomers on a plate. How can this be right?
Nigel Farage.
It's not right. It's completely unfair and it's wrong. You've got the crisis, and I met a consultant, just recently retired consultant from the Pilgrim Hospital earlier. You know, what this town has been through is a population explosion over the course of the last 15 years, which is a direct result of our membership of the European Union. It's astonishing that since 2001, the number of EU nationals living in Boston has increased officially by 467%. However, that figure is undoubtedly wrong, because that would say there are an extra 10,000 people from Eastern Europe have moved here. The figure, we suspect in truth, is nearer 20,000. Now, I think it's important that we conduct this debate along sensible, grown-up lines. This country has always been welcome to people that have come here from across the world, from different cultures, different religions, people who've claimed refugee status, and we did it, you know, since World War II. 30 to 50,000 people a year used to come into this country. The figure is now 500,000 a year, and we see our hospitals, we see primary schools where there are many kids here who can't get into primary schools, being bussed off 20 miles away. We see a benefit system designed primarily for people and families who paid in for generations, now being opened up to people who've been here literally for a few weeks. And on top of all of this, we're about to open the door on January the 1st to the whole of Bulgaria and Romania. It is not right and it is not fair, and it's about time we started to put our own people first.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The rhetoric is also negative. I work in a college where there's students from all different backgrounds. Right. And the positives that brings, and the situation where they're prepared for real life, where they're going to meet in international businesses and all this that goes on. Why are we so negative about the fact that our children are spending time with other children from other places?
Okay.
I absolutely agree with the previous comment there, but we also have to look at the latest OECD report, which actually indicates that migrants have been beneficial to this country, not in a negative way. Mr Farage, please, no, Mr Farage, please stop scaremongering the majority of people. It doesn't work. Stop scaremongering. You talked about let's have a grown-up debate. Let's have a grown-up debate with facts, not scaremongering, and not Daily Mail politics.
I sat here 10 years ago on this panel with David Blunkett, just as we were about to open the door to Eastern Europe in 2004. He said there'd be a population increase of 13,000 people per year in this country. I said that was nonsense because logic said if you extend to poor people the ability to come to a rich country, they'll come in huge numbers. And in the first 2 years, 800,000 people came. That, madam, is a fact.
All right.
Really important.
Mr Farage,
sorry, I just think it's really... Sorry. I think
that is not
important.
backed up by the figures. You are bandying about figures that don't have any...
I'm talking about an OECD report. Now you don't like
and we're talking about the positive contribution and the positive financial contribution.
What about the unemployed youngsters?
All right,
what about the 1 million young people in Britain who haven't got jobs because they're now priced out of the market? What about the working class people in Britain? You're not being given a chance.
I'm a working class.
What about them?
All right, Nigel, hold on. Anna
People
Soubry.
come here to work. They come to Boston to work, and they work in the fields, as you know. They pick the vegetables. They do the jobs. I'm from Nottinghamshire, and I'm old enough to remember the days of the migrant workers that would come over into the fields and do the jobs. Those days have gone. The real debate is about why there are so many people in our country who choose not to work. These people, I feel, as you can hear, with some passion. I don't like your tone, Mr. Farage.
They're discriminated
no,
against.
Please, you're at it again.
They're not given
interrupting.
jobs.
You talk about facts. In my constituency, your party put out a leaflet saying 29 million people from Romania and Bulgaria were going to flood into our country. Well, the population's only 27.5 million of the two of them. You don't talk. You do not talk facts. You talk prejudice.
Everyone can
That's
come.
what you talk,
Everyone
and you
can come.
scaremonger, and you put fear in people's hearts. Look, times are tough. We know that. But when times are tough, there's a danger, and history tells us when things are not good, you turn to the stranger and you blame them, and you shouldn't. That is wrong. And I'm proud of our country's history, and I'm proud that people come here. These are good people. Sometimes not all of them are, like people in our country.
Bring your
aren't
remarks
always
to an
good.
end,
They
because I
come
want to
here
bring other
work,
people in.
and should
Thank you very
welcome
much. The person there, yes. Come on.
Is it a question of immigration or integration that we've got in this area? There seems to be so many of our foreign friends living in our area, but they live separately from ourselves.
Yes,
we don't, as a nation, embrace them and ask them to come and join in what we're doing, and as they don't ask us to come and join in with what they do. Having lived abroad for 5 years and lived in a country where I went there, I didn't speak the language properly. I had my eldest child in a country that I don't speak the language from. I can see how they are intimidated by us and people like the likes of Farage.
Emily Thornberry. Emily Thornberry.
I think that immigration managed properly has huge benefits for this country, and we saw this week a report from the University College London saying that immigrants in the last 10 years from the EU have paid 34% more in taxes than they have ever received in benefits. I think there is an overall benefit for our country, but it does need to be properly managed. And it does seem to me that mistakes have been made and people get anxious about that. And yeah, you're right. 10 years ago, Labour made a mistake and we didn't put in the controls that we should have done for the new accession countries. And we've learned from that, and we should make sure that we put controls in again. We've made mistakes, the current government made mistakes, and people get anxious about that. And they get anxious about... I tell you what they get anxious about, I think, is they see people and they believe them to be being exploited. They see them not being paid properly. They see them in homes of multiple occupancy, where suddenly a family house will suddenly have 8 people in it, and there'll be this hotbedding going on, and there'll be lots of cars outside. They see people, having to pay gangmasters. They see it not being properly controlled, and they see themselves being undercut, and people having to work in unsafe conditions, which no one else would agree to do, and quite rightly. Yeah. People should be paid a decent wage. They should not be exploited. They should not have to pay these sorts of rents, and there needs to be some form of control over that. And that is right. That is right, and we should not allow this to continue. And it does seem to me that this is the sort of management that we need to have.
Emily, you say manage it, and I agree with you. I agree with you. So, I want us to have a managed, sensible, open immigration policy into Britain. What I don't want us to do is to have an open door to nearly 29 million people.
I'll tell you what you want.
So would you, given that you want a managed immigration policy, would you agree with me that it is wholly irresponsible on the 1st of January next year to say to 29 million people, as many of you that want to come can? Should we manage that?
I'll tell you what you want.
Should we manage that?
Let me just I'll tell you what you want.
Well, yes or no,
you want to do part of this race to the bottom. I've got a note here of your policies.
You've got notes on everything, haven't you? But I mean, there you are.
When it comes to people's rights for work, right? You want to get rid of maternity leave. You want to get rid of sickness leave. I'll tell you what you want to do. You want to make sure that migrants are not allowed to come into the country, and people here have to work in the same conditions that those migrants.
All right. Now look, this is fine.
No, we're not wasting.
You don't want to manage it. You want an open door.
Because the management is.
All right. Don't all talk at once, please. If you talk at once, nobody can hear a word you're saying. I'm going to go to the man in the second row there. I want to hear from some members of the audience, because we've had a lot of opposition to the things that Nigel Farage was saying. I want to hear from people who perhaps agree more with what he's saying, and then we'll have a proper debate about it. You, sir, with the tie on there.
I live in a constituency near yourself, a bit further away, near Mansfield. And we do have an awful lot of Eastern Europeans in our area. And no disrespect to them half the time, but my children can't get housing. If you want to have managed immigration or migration, shouldn't you first of all put a decent infrastructure in there? Shouldn't our children be able to speak, or have these children be able to speak the English language first, and have our primary schools to teach English, not to teach Polish and all these other languages first? Let them come into this country by all means, but make sure there's the infrastructure there so that our families and our children can live, and we've got jobs for our children, but sure, let them have the schooling for this country, not their country.
Well,
I don't think you were very nice, or you can't do the programme.
If I can cover some of the things that have been already discussed. I mean, first of all, in my view, I'll get back to your question about housing and so on. I don't think it was a mistake by the Labour government to let the Poles and others come in. The forecasts that were made were on the assumption that countries were going to open up, and they didn't. So instead of going to Germany, where the Poles would have gone, they came here because we opened up. And the interesting thing is, yes, of course, it's caused a number of social tensions. We had, during the period of very substantial migration from those countries, one of the fastest growth rates of any of the countries in Europe. They were very beneficial in all sorts of different ways. Of course, we don't have enough housing. One of the serious problems of the last decade is that housing construction has declined so substantially because of whatever the political reasons at the time, and there were huge cutbacks in that area, and of course privatisation and everything else that had happened. No affordable housing has been built in this country to meet the needs of whoever is here in Boston or the people who are coming out. So it's not who are coming in. So it's not just the fact that they're coming here and they have special privilege. We simply have failed everybody who actually needs affordable housing. What's going to happen now? What's going to happen now in terms of the scaremongering that we're hearing is that we're not going to get the 29 million, even though I agree about the figure is an exaggeration anyway, but because the other countries are opening up. So the Bulgarians mostly go to Germany and Austria. The Romanians mostly go to France and Italy because of the languages. Yes. And that's what's going to happen. We're going to get a certain percentage, but we're not going to get anything like what Nigel Farage is worried about. And we should actually welcome that. Remember, there are 2 million Brits who live abroad in Europe. If we want to start putting controls...
All right. On the front row here, you sir.
As a foreigner, I lived in England for quite a long time, and what's worried me since I moved to Boston 2 years ago is the integration. I work with people in places where people don't want to speak to you English. You talk to them English and they answer you in their own languages. They don't want to learn. You try to explain things and they talk to you again in their language. The kids are suffering in Boston probably with these languages, because once my son, he's only 11 and he starts swearing in Russian.
It's very useful.
And as I'm a foreigner, I try to teach them the things which is in England. They're going to good schools and they're trying to study everything in the proper way. But unfortunately, there is a lot of effect, and the integration, it doesn't exist. And one more thing, which is I agree with Nigel, despite I'm a foreigner.
That's all right.
No, it's the system which is of the benefits. Most of them, they come here and they start claiming on kids they don't exist.
That's right.
Most of them are learning how to claim and get benefits. And I heard some of them, they say, well, there's a lot of money in England, I'm going to take as much as I can. I've been working all the time I've been here, and I've been doing well, and I worked hard. So I think the integration is a big problem, and the government has to address this issue to make it clear to people when they come to England. Yes. Otherwise, we're going to lose the identity in the British way.
Well
and it is getting lost.
Thank you, Zephaniah.
Excellent.
Be careful, my friend. It's not most of them. No, it can never be most of them.
Let me just say something. Let me say.
My father is from Barbados. My mother is from Jamaica. I was born in Birmingham. When I moved into this area, I remember coming to Boston and standing by the church. And when you're a black person in Britain, you start to travel, people ask you, did you get a culture clash when you go to Jamaica? You know, did you kind of have a cultural experience, some kind of culture shock? Or when you go to Africa? When I came to Boston and I stood in the town centre near the church, I remember standing there and looking and seeing all these people that to me looked white, but I didn't hear any English. And I remember standing there thinking, what is this? Now, I'm not saying this negatively. I started to think about it and I started to understand about migration. I ended up making 2 television programmes about it. A lot of the things that people say about the houses and the services are real myths. We've had about 3 inquiries into them. For example, 1 year, a lot of local people said crime had gone up. It had actually decreased by 2%. Right? The Pilgrim Hospital said they probably, if it wasn't for the migrants, would have probably closed their maternity ward. Imagine for Bostonians, if you had to have a baby, you had to go to, I don't know, Lincoln or Peterborough. You would then be really complaining. And, you know, when I made the film, I remember a farmer took me to one side and he said to me, Benjamin, I used to be a good old-fashioned racist. You know, he was honest to me. He said, I would never talk to black people and I would never talk to foreigners. But I tried to get local people to work on my land. And he said he couldn't. And he said he couldn't even get his own family to work on his land. And he would prefer to employ local people, but he couldn't. I understand the problem with integration. There are very few foreigners here now, very few Eastern Europeans. I'm just guessing that. On the whole, they don't get involved in the political and cultural life of the area. But let me explain something to you. When my parents came to the Caribbean, they settled in Aston and Handsworth, and they didn't go anywhere else. They didn't integrate either. It takes a bit of time for you to get confidence. It takes time for you to settle and have financial freedom and confidence to move on.
Okay. A lot of people come in on this. Also.
The panel talk about scapegoating and anxiety, but my anxiety to the migrants is a reality. Now, 2 weeks for a doctor's appointment, 4.5 hours in A&E wait to be seen.
But you get that all over the country.
Never had that 10 years ago.
I think it is fair. I mean, we know that there are particular difficulties when it comes to funding in Boston, and I know that the local schools, for example, make a very good case that because so many children don't have English as their first language, they actually need more money. So I'd be the first to put my...
The government has actually given them a very large
No,
amount
we
of
need...
money.
No.
And 88% of parents get their first choice school?
Yeah, no, I wasn't...
That wasn't I wish in my borough they had that 88%
The point I was going to make was we know that there are problems with the funding for local authorities, and I know that that's something that's been taken up by the local MP and it's been taken up in the DCLG as well. But I would also say this, yes, we do have to control immigration, we do have to manage things properly, and we do have to make sure that when people come here, frankly, they don't take the mick, they don't exploit our system. And that's one of the things the immigration bill will do.
How can you manage it if you have an open border?
No, because Vicky's made that argument very well, she's explained it, and you are putting fear into people's hearts when people don't need to have that fear. They really don't.
The woman here on the right. Yes, you.
Yeah, it isn't a them and us. It's about integration, but the integration takes time. The town needs money. We are waiting too long for doctors' appointments. There are all these things. But the other thing is, as a councillor, I'm finding with some of the youngsters that are coming, the young Eastern European teenagers that are coming to the college where I work, that I'm having lots of problems with them with anxieties, because when they come to this country, their parents don't speak English. They go to school to learn English. They end up dealing with the council, the gas board, telephone people. They end up becoming the adults within the house. By the time they get to their teenage years, they're then having problems with panic attacks, anxiety. They've lost their childhood. The government should be looking at what happens when we have the immigrants coming in. Fine, there's nothing wrong with the immigrants coming in. That's great. We need them. We want them. They integrate well. We have too many in Boston because we can't cope. The infrastructure cannot cope. Doctors, hospitals, schools cannot cope.
The man up there I'd like to hear from some more members of the audience. The man up there on the right, on the far right there, yes. That's not a political statement, it's geographical.
The original questioner mentioned newcomers. And immediately, Nigel Farage assumes that to mean Eastern Europeans. Well, my wife and myself are newcomers, but we come from Northamptonshire.
Wow.
I'm a newcomer.
We are also using the local doctors, and we also have to wait. But we're not blaming the Eastern Europeans because we have to wait.
Well, yeah, OK, sir. You know, hopefully from Northampton you've integrated fairly quickly here, I'm not sure.
No,
I'm not so sure.
It's no different.
But the basic point I made, that the official figure shows that the population of EU migrants in Boston has gone up by 500% since 2001, and that's an underestimate. That figure holds. And of course that puts pressure on schools, hospitals and local services.
It's because it's such a lovely place to live.
But it wouldn't. You in the check shirt in the third row.
Yeah, I think there's a big problem with immigrants coming and taking seasonal jobs. But I think they must come on a one-way ticket because there's not many people going back after the jobs are finished.
And is the work still seasonal?
Sorry?
Is the work still largely seasonal?
It is round here. I mean, I work on a...
Has it not spread now?
Sorry?
Has it not spread to the 12 months?
Not really, no, not on the farms and things.
But
and
they
cabbage picking.
want to say it makes, I mean, it does unfortunately make sense because, and I'm sure you're right, and that is because going back home doesn't give them jobs that they would like to have, because Europe has been in a bit of a mess and crisis. So we have, certainly in the UK, seen lots of people come who would have normally gone back, either seasonally or pretty quickly after they made some money here and returned because their economies were doing reasonably well. But that has stopped for a while. But hopefully, what you might see is lots of people leaving if the Polish economy does as well as, continues to do as well as it's done recently. So it may happen. So unfortunately, we've been hit. And that's why there's so much anti-sentiment, sort of negative sentiment about it, by the fact that Europe has done so poorly economically. But I have just one little case study to tell you and why we need to really worry about what Nigel is saying. And that is Greece. I'm Greek myself and came here to study and then stayed. But what's been going on in Greece is that it has become the entry point for all the immigrants who are trying to come into Europe. And the population has increased exponentially. It's just extraordinary what's been going on. And what we have there is a strange system where the Constitution says everyone has to go, or the kids have to go to Greek schools. So they have to learn Greek. And within a couple of years, they're Greek. So they have the problem that the lady here talked about, which is that the kids then take over in a way, but they're the Greeks and the parents have to adjust. What has happened, of course, because of all these immigrants coming in, is that the nationalistic tendencies have increased hugely, and we ended up with a party which took quite a lot of seats in government, which has now had all its leaders arrested because they basically were inciting violence against the immigrants. And that has become a serious issue in Europe, and it's not just in Greece, but it's elsewhere too. What we really need to watch here is that we don't end up in the same situation of blaming the foreigners for whatever it is that may be wrong with our own economy. It is...
I just want to remind people that you people here know that 400 years ago, people left from this Boston.
Yes.
And they migrated to the United States of America to form another Boston.
Yep.
Nigel, you should go on a programme called Who Do You Think You Are? Because I'm sure that you will find that you've got migrants in your family.
And actually, Benjamin, what is really interesting about this debate is everyone around this table says we should have a managed migration policy into this country, which I completely and utterly agree with. But the elephant in the room, And what the three parties won't talk about is the fact that if you're a member of the European Union, which has now admitted very poor countries, you have no management at all. There are no restrictions on the numbers of people coming to Britain next year from Romania and Bulgaria, and that is irresponsible, stupid, and against the interests of our own people in this country. That's the point.
I'm going to take one more point from the woman in the centre there.
I still think you're a migrant.
Undoubtedly.
No,
undoubtedly.
Yes.
I'd like to go back to what the lady said before about our youth not wanting to work and not wanting these jobs. Is it just coincidence that in 2004 to now, our youth unemployment has doubled?
Exactly.
Is it just coincidence?
Not in Boston.
Exactly.
Can I
I'm talking as a whole.
Can I say, I think there's something, I think in terms of youngsters, I think that all local jobs should be advertised in the job centre, and I don't think that all of them are, and get to not to give youngsters a chance.
And not in this country. 800,000 jobs were not advertised in this country, only abroad.
Yeah, and I'm saying that they should be advertised. I think they should be advertised in the job centres here, and if people want to advertise them elsewhere, that's fine. And you might then start getting a bit of a break-up of the workforce, as opposed to, you know, there being an advertisement somewhere and people coming over, which I don't think is right. The other question is, and I think the future is with the youngsters, and some of the things that people have been saying about the schools is really important. In my area, in my part of inner London, we have people from all over the world come to my area, and a lot of the mothers don't speak English, and we started teaching English as a second language attached to the school. So the mums would come in with the kids. The kids, frankly, don't have any problem learning English. I mean, there was a boy arrived from Korea, and in 6 months, having not spoken any English at all, he's now speaking it fluently, but his mother was a different matter. And the school, it was a really good school, set up classes attached to the school. And in that way, because the mums wanted to be able to talk to the teachers, and that was their motivation. And in that way, we can work towards some sort of integration. But I think you're right. The key to this is youngsters.
Can I just ask you one thing before we move on to another question? Why did Labour, according to Peter Mandelson, send out search parties for people to come to this country to work in 2004?
I think the point was that at a time of a booming economy, not all the vacancies could be filled, and so yeah, you know, we looked around, and as I started off, you know, managed migration can be of huge benefit to a country. And please don't forget, we've been talking about the National Health Service. It would be nowhere without people coming to this country and working in the National Health Service.
OK, we'll move on. Paul Tuplin, please. Paul Tuplin.
With a suspected terrorist successfully evading the police this week by wearing a burqa, is there now a clear case for banning the burqa?
This has been causing some trouble to the Home Secretary, and we'll hear from Anna Soubry on it in just a moment. But this is, of course, Ahmed Mohammed, 27-year-old, who was in a mosque and then was curiously put on a burqa and was then spotted by CCTV leaving in a burqa, which I thought would be no disguise at all, because how would they know it was him? But anyway, apparently they did. Vicky Pryce, is there a case for banning the burqa?
Well, I think there should be freedom for people to wear what they like. So we should look at the two things separately. Whether someone disguises themselves by throwing a sheet over their heads and are able to disappear has nothing to do with whether we approve of women wearing burqas. So let's agree with that. But in theory, people should be free to choose and look the way they like and cover themselves if they want to. My worry is that a lot of those decisions to wear, you know, whatever it is that perhaps your religion or perhaps your family think is appropriate, may be made either under duress or the girls are already indoctrinated enough to believe that this is what they should do, and that in the end they may not have a choice. And that because of that, I think that burqas are a bad thing. And I'm not sure they should be banned, but certainly they should be discouraged as much as possible, because women should be able to be like any other member of the community, you know, engage in any other activity. I was shocked. I was, in fact, strangely enough, I was about to go and do a fringe event at the Conservative Party conference, and I was in some hotel and saw this lady wearing a full garment with her children, trying to eat this egg. And I didn't really know how to do this, really. And she was sort of lifting her little veil and eating it. And I felt so sorry for her at the time. And I thought, surely no person in the right minds could make a decision to wander around completely covered up. So my view is, if we can manage to reduce it as much as we possibly can...
Right, but you wouldn't ban it?
I wouldn't ban it.
Right. Anna Soubry, your great hero, Kenneth Clarke, of course, said this week that it's a most peculiar costume for people to adopt, a kind of bag. Is that your view too?
I don't think I'd call it a bag, but I mean, actually what Ken was talking about, he's talking about whether or not it should be allowed to be worn in court. And he's right. You shouldn't be allowed to give evidence, be you a witness or be you a defendant, if your face is covered. I would not, I'm absolutely with Vicky on this, I would not ban the burqa to be worn around the streets. I'm an old feminist. I wish people didn't do it. I wish women didn't feel the need to cover their faces with veils. But I would not deny them the right of doing it. But like Vicky says, I think we have to look at why some women do it. I accept that there are some women who subscribe to Islam, who do it saying that they are feminists and they do it from free choice and so on and so forth. I find it a peculiar concept, I have to say. But I would not ban it.
The woman up there on the left, in the second row, yes, from the back. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the women that I think that we should have freedom of expression and freedom of religion in this country. However, I think we should recognise there are certain occupations where the burqa inhabits the interaction between the caregiver and the care receiver, such as a school teacher or a nurse or a doctor. And I wouldn't like it for those situations.
And the woman behind you, in the back row there, with the dark hair, yes.
Do you not think...
Man. The woman to the your left.
I was going to say, obviously, there is the differentiation between the full face-covering burqa and wearing a burqa, and is it not more of a cultural issue than it is a religious issue?
OK. And the gentleman there in the back, second row from the back.
If we're a society that fully accepts the wearing of the burqa in the UK, which I fully appreciate we're a multinational country, are Western women similarly welcomed wearing their choice of clothing in strongly Muslim countries?
Not, I think. But Nigel Farage, the French, of course, have banned the burqa.
They have, and the Belgians. Yeah. And the Belgians.
I don't know how successfully. I don't know how many prosecutions there
have been. Some, only a handful. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, this whole debate, UKIP started this debate 4 years ago. We talked about whether the burqa was appropriate or not, and we received abuse from all sides. And I see the argument is changing and moving on. Seems to me that the important thing here is we have to say, in this country, you know, wherever you come from, whatever your religion is, we have to have equality before the law. And that means that if we can't wear a crash helmet walking into the bank, then a burqa shouldn't be allowed in the bank. You know, and the same goes for airport security or getting on the London Underground or whatever it is. So equality before the law.
Sorry, getting on the Underground, travelling on the Underground.
I tell you what, if I donned a balaclava, you know, and went round the Circle Line all day, I don't think it'd be terribly long before I got a pull from the police. Really rather worried about who I was. So let's have equality before the law. I wouldn't say that we should ban people wearing the burqa walking down Boston High Street. There are all sorts of, I'm sure, very unusual clothes that are worn walking down Boston High Street. I wouldn't go to that extreme.
You're not allowed to go on the Underground.
But I do think, well, I can assure you that after 7/7, and don't forget, of course, one of the bombers from 7/7 escaped wearing a burqa as well.
On a bus?
Well, on a bus is a public place where I don't think you're stopped from getting on wearing a crash helmet.
Can you clarify UKIP policy on this?
Yeah.
Because it does seem to be a big
We want equality before the law. We do not wish to see the burqa being worn in places where the rest of us would not be allowed to cover our heads or faces. It's as simple as that.
No, you can't. Emily Thornberry, Shadow Attorney General. Equality before the law, is that the right way of putting it?
I certainly think that in court, that witnesses and defendants should not be covering their face. I think it's really important that juries get an opportunity to assess people, and they can't do that if their face is covered. And I'm afraid I just don't think. And I also agree with the lady at the back who says that certain carers, it's really important to be able to establish a close... I wouldn't want my 4-year-old looked after by somebody wearing a burqa. I wouldn't want my elderly mum looked after by somebody wearing a burqa. They need to be able to show their face. I wouldn't mind if they worked in records in the hospital. They could wear whatever they like in those circumstances. But I think there are certain times. I think the question begins with the idea that, you know, there's a man who's under a TPIMS and he escapes wearing a burqa. Should we ban the burqa? I mean, a few weeks ago, somebody under a TPIMS escaped in a taxi. Should we be now banning taxis?
All right. Benjamin Zephaniah. Briefly, if you would.
The episode you mentioned, it was kind of Keystone Cop moment, I think. I remember when there was a truant officer who used to go around and chase kids who were playing truant, and he got me one day, I was playing truant, and he put me in the car, the back seat. I just went through, and I went through the other door. And he drove off, he jumped to the car and drove off without me. It kind of reminded me of that moment. Look, you know, there is nowhere in the Quran where it says a woman has to wear a burqa. Yeah. But I'm going to tell you one reason. I had a secretary that used to wear a burqa. She didn't wear a burqa, Nigel, until she went on the underground. And she was sitting on the underground and somebody said to her, "You look suspicious, can I look in your bag?" And she said, "I'm a student, why do you want to look in my bag?" "You make me nervous," he said. And the whole carriage turned against this young girl. And she came to my office that day. I took her home, and she became... Politicised, yes. She said, "If you can't accept me like I am, then I'm going to go back to my shell." Yeah. I believe that if you're in court, there should be some kind of compromise where you can give evidence in private or whatever and show your face. But the main thing I would say to the Islamic community is, look, women wear veil because they say they don't want to be seen as sexual objects. Who are you being seen as sexual objects by? Men. So the problem is with men.
All right. Thank you very much. We've got 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes before the programme ends. Mark Finney has a question. I'd like just brief answers to this, but it's topical today and indeed every day. Mark Finney.
With regard to today, is the possibility of somebody snooping on our personal emails a small price to pay for our security?
We heard the 3 heads of the security services before the House of Commons today. And is it a small price to pay to have them snooping on us, Emily Thornberry?
It's a really difficult balance to always get, because on the one hand, I mean, it's our first duty as politicians to make sure that citizens are safe, right? But we also have a duty to ensure that our fundamental rights are not encroached on unless there is a really good reason. I don't see why there's really good reason for security people to be able to browse people's emails. I think they need to have strong reason to be able to look at the content of people's emails. There's certain amount of evidence that can sometimes be gathered by just simply who's contacted who and when, and that sort of traffic flows, and that's a different issue. But actually looking at the content of an email, I think they need to get a court order or they need to get permission from someone else. I don't think they should be allowed to have access. And I think that the checks and balances that we have on our security services at the moment need to be looked at again.
Okay. Benjamin Zephaniah, if you could be brief, because we've only a few minutes left.
Every time you come to me, you want me to be brief.
I know, but that's not... No, I'd like you to go on forever, but I can't let you. Our adversaries are rubbing their hands with glee. Al-Qaeda are lapping it up, is what they said about the leaks from Edward Snowden in the House today, or in the committee today. Do you agree with that?
No. I hate the idea of people looking at my emails, snooping on me. And, you know... This has all come because of the Snowden thing. When children are in school, we keep telling them to tell the truth. If they see something that is wrong and corrupt, and they see people in power abusing their power, tell the truth. The National Health Service has whistleblowers lately, whistleblowers who have lost their jobs and are suffering because of it. and we punish them for telling the truth. So what are we saying? That people who are powerful, we don't tell the truth about people who are powerful? I think it's really important that we know exactly what our security services are doing, and if they are going to snoop on us, that they should have orders from government, from higher up, because, you know, a lot of the investigations that they've done, I think, how many, 30-odd have been...
34.
34? Most of them come to nothing. Most of them come to nothing. So, no, I'm completely against it. I don't think they should be snooping on us, and I don't think it lessens our security.
Anna Soubry.
No, I largely agree with what Emily said, actually. I think it is a question of checks and balances. It is difficult because it is the duty of every government to make sure that its citizens are safe, and sometimes that means that there are encroachments on civil liberties and privacies. But again, if the right checks and balances are put in place, whether it's orders that are obtained by judges, whether it is some form of judicial overseeing and appeal to judges, then I think we can begin to put those right checks and balances. But it's difficult because, as I say, the overriding duty of us all must be to make sure that we are safe, and sometimes that means we have to encroach on people's privacy.
Vicky Pryce.
I think it's too high a price to pay, and that has been reflected in the shock we've all had. And look what's going on in Germany. I mean, why are people bugging Merkel's phone? You know, it's just gone crazy, and we've had no checks and balances. My worry is that it's just gone too far, and bringing it back is going to be very, very hard to do, and I think we need to be much tougher about what goes on right now.
Quick comment from you. Brief, if you will.
It's not very nice being snooped on, but it's better than being blown up and other people getting blown up.
Nigel Farage.
Well, you know,
which unfortunately now is a reality because it's happened.
I think that's right. I mean, you know, I hate Big Brother. I hate the big state. I hate the thought of being snooped on. But you know what? There are billions of emails and texts being sent every day. They haven't even got the facilities, sir, to snoop on all of us. They're not looking for you. They're not worried about any of you and what you do and what you say. Maybe one or two on the panel here they might want to monitor. But really, you know, they are... And I think I take the view of the last... Of the last contributor, that actually we do face some huge threats. And Benjamin, one of the reasons why 34 potential terrorist attacks in this country have been thwarted is that they have been able to get on top of it before time. We face some tremendous threats in this modern world, and I think we need to have some faith and confidence and belief in our security services.
Our hour is up, those fateful words. I'm sorry to those who hadn't been able to get in, and members of the panel who want to speak longer than they were allowed to. But next week, we're going to be in Portsmouth next week. We're going to have Ed Davey for the Liberal Democrats there, the Conservative former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nigel Lawson, and Stella Creasy for Labour on the panel, among others. The week after that, we're going to be in Salford in Greater Manchester. And this is a rather curious programme, I just better explain. It's divided the audience between people 30 or under and 60 or over. You get the idea. It's a kind of crude generation gap. And the generation game. And we'll just be seeing what their views are on the economy, on education, on housing, on all those things that affect people. Now, if you want to come to Portsmouth, that's next week, or you can be any age for the Portsmouth job, or Salford if you're under 30 or over 60. Go to our website, the address is on the screen there, or call, as ever, 0330 123 99 88. If you're listening to this on Radio 5 Live, you can continue the debate on Question Time Extra Time. Here we have to shut up. My thanks to our panel and to everybody who came here to take part from Boston in Lincolnshire. Good night.